Welcome to the Coptimizer podcast, a platform dedicated to uncuffing your true potential in public safety. We're here to provide you with valuable tips and insights that will help you optimize your life and career. I'm retired Chief Patrick Flanley, and I'm honored to be your guide and coach on this journey. Here, I'll share the latest insights and strategies to help you survive and thrive in the demanding world of public safety. Our noble duty is to protect and serve. We embody the role of peacemakers in our communities. However, this profession's immense physical and mental demands come with a price. If we fail to take a proactive approach for our well-being and lead ourselves first, then the stress from the job can and will lead to poor health outcomes. We have all seen it play out. Not only does this impact our professional and personal lives, but it also affects our ability to fulfill this sacred duty. Like many of you, my journey has been filled with tremendous challenges, with highs and lows. However, through creativity, experience, and a positive attitude, I successfully managed over 30 years in law enforcement, emerging healthy and happy. Now, I am driven to share what I've learned to show you that the path is not all doom and gloom. There is hope and a profound purpose in serving your community, and I'm here to show you that it does not have to come at the cost of your health and well-being. Join us as we explore cutting-edge research, interview top experts, and share inspiring stories of transformation. Whether on duty or off, it's time to optimize your potential and live your best life. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Coptimizer Podcast. Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. I've got a really cool guest today. They're all cool, but I like to make them all feel special because they all are very special. Why? Because they like to help cops, and we need a lot of help. So, and we even need help from people that like to help firemen too.
Fair enough. I know it's hard. It's a hard transition.
Megan Lautz, thank you very much. I really do appreciate, all jokes aside, I really do appreciate you spending some time with us. I was introduced to you recently. I heard you on the Chief Exchange podcast, and the timing was very fortuitous because you were talking about electrolytes and sports drinks, and perfect timing for just a topic that I wanted to touch on with you today. So if you don't mind, can you just jump in and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Megan Lautz. I'm a registered dietitian. I am a civilian. I can't do blood and guts, so that kind of knocks me out of police and fire, right? But I have been working for relatively large departments, about like 1,400 firefighters, 1,600 police officers, for the past 8 years. And then also do consulting through my business, Rescue RD. And really, I specialize in people who just don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the energy for nutrition, especially when it comes to shift work. So that's what I'm all about.
Shift work. Those two words, it's probably one of the things that is the least appreciated in terms of the detrimental effects it can have on human physiology. Um, we don't necessarily have to go into a deep dive right away on, uh, but yeah, see, shift
Yeah.
work. You when you start talking about sleep dysregulation and nutrition, people always try to put these things in silos, and I've talked about this a lot,
Yeah.
but you can't. Everything is interconnected. It's
Mhm.
interrelated. So I think this is again just one of the reasons why I know people are going to get so much out of this conversation and getting to tap into your knowledge a little bit. So um, you So I mean, what's your background? What got you interested in nutrition and becoming a dietitian? Are you coming from like a sports background? What was it?
Yeah, I mean, I had an interest in sports nutrition. That's why I initially got into it in college. I just like the idea of performance nutrition and the effect that nutrition has on like sport. I used to do bodybuilding, like competitions, that kind of stuff. So I had a lot of interest in both the fitness side and nutrition side. I was a personal trainer, even before I became a dietitian when I was in school. So I've always kind of done both. In terms of falling into the first responder space, um, I got laid off. I was a wellness coordinator at Northrop Grumman. They cut their wellness program entirely, and I fell into a position at an Occ health clinic in Montgomery County. And I just happened to start working with firefighters, start working with police in that occupational clinic. And I just a much bigger interest, right, in that population compared to the general population. Because, in my opinion, it's a combination of sports nutrition or performance nutrition and corporate wellness, right? You
Right.
have an aspect of performance for the job, but a lot of the job can be sedentary depending on what rank and level and where you're stationed and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of that perfect combination of corporate wellness in sports nutrition. So, started doing 24-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. I passed the firefighter CPAT, which took me some training in order to do that. So really tried to immerse myself in that area to really understand, police and fire, because the reality is come in and just say, hey, you just eat your vegetables, but if I don't understand your job, then like you're going to write me off. You don't really understand what I'm going through. You don't understand the trauma, the shift work aspect, the time management aspect, the mandatory overtime, all of those other things. Um, it just doesn't work as well for that for first responders as it does for the 9 to 5 information you find on the internet.
So Montgomery County is for most people on the East Coast are probably familiar with it, but
Mhm.
you get into the Midwest here where I am, or even out west, they may not realize like how big the agencies are there, the
Yes.
dense population, the volume of work that they do.
Hmm.
So it's, you're right in the DC metro area. Just that's yeah, that's pretty cool. You touched on a couple of things that I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit. When so from an occupational care perspective, in working, that transition from the public sector, or I'm sorry, the private sector, and having these corporate wellness programs,
Hmm.
we're always a little bit behind in the public sector. We tend
Yeah.
to see things like that work or that work well, and then we try to mimic them in our line of work. And I think the cultural competence piece that you just touched on is really important. So I appreciate the effort that you made to understand what it's like to be a first responder, because oftentimes when you and this goes back to sleep, but when you work with trainers and other people that are 9 to 5, 7 to 3 type of lifestyles,
Hmm.
what they're suggesting, what works for them may not work for a first responder that is working shift work. And I think sometimes with a group that I work with, Dr. Greenwald out of Specialty Health in Reno, we have this Blood Doesn't Lie. It's an insulin resistance program that we do a lot of work with. But he, he has a great saying. It's like what he found out is that, cops trust other cops, and sometimes they don't trust other people. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, because people like you are out there, people that aren't necessarily first responders, but have a deep understanding of what the lifestyle is and the benefits that come from it, but also again some of those negative side effects just from working, shift work and having working in a high stress environment. So the before we go down that road, what do you think it is about, even in the private sector, why do you think wellness programs struggle, and why do you think they fail and close up? Because that's not a unique story. I mean, that happens all the time. People like, oh, you know, we want to show that our employees that we care. They're asking for these programs, so let's start these great programs, and then they invest a bunch of money up front, and then it just seems like a lot of the programs fall flat. They don't reach the
Yeah,
goals that they're looking for, or they don't even set goals, quite frankly, before they get started. So maybe touch on
sure.
that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's probably more relevant. So I'm actually no longer with Montgomery County. I'm currently with Fairfax County
Yep.
Fire and Police, actually, both. And the reason I wanted to mention that specifically is because our wellness program is probably one of the most stacked in the country for first responders, especially for the police side of things. For context, Fairfax County is to the left of DC if you're looking at a map, and Montgomery County is in Maryland to the right of DC if you're looking at a map. Very pretty busy departments, I would say. Of course, there's always the slower sections, but for the most part, about the same 1,400 firefighters ish, and then about 1,600 ish sworn officers. Our program in Fairfax has me, the dietitian, full time, four strength coaches, seven or eight behavioral health therapists, athletic trainer, a director of rehab, and for like injuries specifically, not the mental health side of rehab,
Yeah. And it's
and
an
then a
award
physical
where
therapist.
I mean, they've gotten a lot of recognition for the programs that they're doing, and rightfully so. So
Fairfax.
that's yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so Montgomery County, like, it was just me. It was me, the dietitian slash trainer, going out and like trying to attack, fire, police. They also had me bus operators, corrections. They had a warehouse, animal services, and it was way too much for one person. Like, it's like impossible because each group has a different language you have to speak to them when it comes to health. Like, for example, firefighters, if I come out and say, hey, eat this at lineup, and I say that to the officers, they're going to be like, what do you mean lineup? Like, it's roll call, and they might not be able to eat during roll call. So there are these language nuances that are really specific. So having that really well rounded program can make a big difference. Plus, now I can just focus on nutrition and nutrition programs. We have the strength coaches who do the strength coaches programs. We have the physical therapist who does the physical therapy and the rehab side of that kind of stuff. So our program is probably the most stacked in the country that I'm aware of. We initially, it was just fire. I was just hired for fire. We only had one strength coach with fire in 2021. And then the police chief was like, wait a minute, why does fire just have this? Let's buy into this.
Yeah.
Which is how it always goes.
It
Fire gets
did. It
something
does. I'm
shiny and
telling
then
you,
the police.
we joke about firemen all the time, but
Yeah.
firemen have it figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
they
and
definitely are good at getting resources.
it's almost like the program gets started and then the police see the shiny thing and it's working. And they're like, wait a second, I want some of that. So I want to say 2022, they bought into the WellFit contract, which is our whole wellness program. We rebuilt out gyms. We now have three workouts at two different locations, headquarters and the WellFit gym for police and fire. Not only is this helping our police and firefighters get more fit, but it's also helping with those relationships. So, in terms of like now, if you're on the scene of some sort of incident, you have that relationship. There's better communication. So, there's some other residual benefits other than just getting people fit, right? Or getting people
Right.
healthier. Um, so, in terms of that success point, uh, all of our providers are culturally competent. Like, they have made a super strong effort to really understand the job. For example, Brandon Holder is one of our strength coaches. He just came on with police in 2022, I believe, with the contract. And he was out at he did ride alongs at every single station. He still does ride alongs. He's at the range shooting. He's immersing himself. And I think if you are a wellness provider, especially a civilian wellness provider, you have to do that. If you come in guns blazing, and you're missing the mark, they're gonna burn you at the stake and kick you out immediately. You know what I mean? So
Well, you won't get buy-in, you won't get
no,
participation, and I think
you won't fill your schedule.
and that's where that programs fail there. For having spent 10 years building, yeah, I've been teaching wellness classes in policing for over 20 years, but for the last 10 years that I was working as a chief, trying to bring in
Mhm.
the different experts and different resources that officers are that they first and foremost what they need, but then also what they're asking for, and then trying to do that in a balance with a budget. Um, it's I wish it were as simple as just saying, "Hey, this is what I want," and building it out, but It doesn't, it's not always that easy, and not every agency is resourced the same.
Right.
So, and people just, I was presenting with someone from Indianapolis Metro just a few weeks ago, and they have an amazing wellness program. Their peer support program is one of the best in the country.
Mhm.
But people always, I think sometimes police officers in particular from smaller departments or mid-sized agencies, they make assumptions that large departments just have more resources and
Mhm.
bigger budgets so they can do these things. But everything is a matter of scale. So
Right.
when you have a bigger organization and a bigger agency, everything costs more. So because you're building at scale. So while not every agency is going to need the extent of resources that you're providing in Fairfax or that you're a part of there, sometimes it might be a one-stop, one person being a one-stop shop for
Right.
a much smaller organization. I would say the most important thing is to make sure that you're doing something. So if you're an officer that's listening to this and you're looking to build a wellness program, certainly what you guys are doing out there on the East Coast is fantastic, and I think that can be a model for long-term success. But don't make great the enemy of good by starting, even if it just means starting small. And the and one of the things I wanted to touch on too, particularly with you being a civilian, bringing your expertise into the first responder world, to touch on what I mentioned earlier, sometimes cops only trust other cops,
Mhm.
which is not a healthy thing, but particularly when you have people with excellent expertise and backgrounds and experience, knowledge, training, education that they can bring to help you, and they can customize what they know to be able to help. So don't, like that's another cautionary tale is don't always assume just because someone isn't a police or firefighter that they don't know what they're talking about and that they can't help you. Wrong. So, um, uh, and maybe, and I'm sure people have challenged you a little bit along the way because that's what cops like to do, right? They like to
Yeah.
poke the bear a little bit, challenge, press, just to kind of see what kind of response they're going to get. Um, but I would, overall, with all that in mind, I mean, overall, what has been the response from the firefighters and the police officers on the ground to you as a civilian coming in and working with them?
Well, I mean, I think because so to clarify what I do in Fairfax, I spend probably, I do about 15 to 20 one-on-one sessions a week. Plus I try to do about five, some station visits a month. Um, and when you do that many one-on-ones, you start to notice a lot of trends. People have the same problems. What do I eat on the go? What do I eat when I'm tired and cranky? What are some better fast food options when I don't have the energy for meal prep? What are some frozen, non perishable things that aren't going to go bad in my fridge when I'm too tired when I come back from work? What are some options that I can do when I don't have the time and the energy? So that's my first assumption is there's no time, there's no energy. But I also know that a lot of the information from a nutrition perspective is overly simplified. Just eat off of whole foods. Um, this is the healthy plate. Divide your plate like this. When the whole foods are going bad in my officer's fridge and they don't eat off of a plate in a patrol car. So it gets hard. So a lot of my presentations are tailored to those things. Here are some non-perishable carbs you can do pre-workout. Here are some healthier fast food options, healthier frozen options. Have you tried outsourcing your meal prep? Giving a lot of really tangible, quick, realistic tips. And I think that breaks down that icy wall that officers put up. Um, and that's usually where I start to get people. Also, once I get one person from one division, like if I get someone from major crimes, next thing you know, I have the whole half of the department, right? So it's a referral kind of based business. Once I get one person comfortable, the floodgates open, and next thing I know, I have half the division. So I think it comes down to it for the wellness person perspective is are you really understanding your officer's problems and providing realistic solutions? Or are you jumping? I like the analogy of trying to get a firefighter to a second story window without a ladder. telling them to just go vegan and giving them no stepwise approach to doing so because that's the perfect diet. Well, number one, they don't even like that diet. Number two, you gave them nothing to get there. So I went on a tangent, but
No,
hopefully that
no,
answered.
we're good at tangents here.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think my whole life has been a tangent.
Same, same.
Uh, no, that makes perfect sense. Um, the so you're getting good buy-in. That's good to hear. And
Mhm.
you mentioned something that I actually I've had it as my tagline on my personal email for years. It's energy, not time, is our greatest resource. And
Mhm.
that's a quote that I picked up from Jim Lehr years ago. And you know, for those in the sports performance world, if you've never heard of Jim Lehr, Loehr, just look at it. You know, he's written several books, but you know,
Mhm.
opened up one of the first performance, like formal performance optimization centers in the country, and eventually got they you know they're yeah big operation down in Florida. But you know, if you think about that, energy, not time, is our greatest resource. Time is a fixed resource, and we all know that we've got 365 days in a year. We've got 24 hours in a day. We've got 7 days a week. With that in mind, if you have no energy to approach your day, then it takes a lot more time to do anything that you need to do.
Mhm.
Um, if you have high levels of energy, you can make very good use and efficient use of your time. Um, you know, my I think one of the downfalls that I've always had, you know, as a type A type of person is I always wanted high levels of energy so I could get more done and get more accomplished. Um, the down the downside to that is when you never don't know how to say no and you're constantly on the go, then you know you kind of then it becomes a never-ending search for the energy. So I do like to take the approach now where, you know, balance has to be built into that, where you want to have energy for spending time on the things that are going to drive the most value in your
Mhm.
life and for what you're trying to accomplish. And that it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. So with that in mind, what when you get on the ground and you've taken this boots on the ground approach, um, you know, by doing the ride-alongs, by getting involved, being hands-on, you get a few early adopters into the program. They really become your selling point for the program. But what are some of the common um, the commonalities that you are seeing, particularly when it comes to police officers? What might be driving some of the issues there, whether it's from a habit perspective or information or reluctance to buy in. But I guess maybe it's kind of a big question, but what are some of the issues that you're seeing most commonly with police officers when it comes to nutrition?
I would say, I mean, probably the number one issue is that like all or nothing approach, right? Like I'm either doing whole 30, like 75 hard and keto at the same time, or I'm doing absolutely nothing when it comes to my nutrition or it comes to my fitness and wellness and that kind of thing, right? Um, and I get it because I came like I've come from a bodybuilding background. I'm a type A psychopath who overschedules themselves as well, but I don't have exposure to trauma and I get to sleep at night most of the time. So those are all factors. Um, but that all or nothing approach, a lot of times, is kind of the nail in the coffin when it comes to this on and again, off again, on again, off again approach when it comes to officer wellness. So a lot of times, I'll come on these podcasts, right? And a big question is, tell me your biggest success story that you've ever had. And it's
Yeah.
like, you almost want me to say, oh, I've helped someone lose 100 pounds or something like crazy wild. But in my opinion, my most success stories are like I've lost 20 pounds over the course of 6 months to a year, but I didn't change my whole freaking life to do it. Made some small changes to my nutrition without having to meal prep everything and only eat chicken and broccoli. And I'm doing this on 2 to 3 workouts a week because that's all I can really sustain right now when I'm working full time. Plus, I've got kids in the sports world, so you're spending half your weekends when you are off at baseball practices and soccer practices and tournaments and that kind of thing. And the reality is, at that season of life, you don't have that leeway. So I think some of the biggest success that you can have as an officer is really kind of lowering the bar, which is like not what anybody wants to hear. Like, why would I lower the bar? You lower the bar so you can, it's just above what's comfortable, right? So you
Right.
can actually see achievement, right? Like, okay, so for example, I had a homicide detective who worked, I think, like 56 hours of overtime in a pay period, 2 weeks, because she was the lead on a case. And she was beating herself up because she had a piece of pizza and a side salad for lunch one day. And I was like, well, it sounds like you hit your craving, but you were realistic with it and got something healthy on the side. You balanced it out. And a
Right.
lot of officers will say, well, you just did the most unhealthy thing there. How dare you get pizza? And it's like, no, you're getting absolutely hammered. You're exhausted. You met your craving, but you also got your healthier option, right? So are you going to see maybe like massive amounts of weight loss with that? Maybe not. But when you reduce the portion, because most people want to have 2 to 3 slices of pizza
Well, it's
realistically,
hard
or
to eat
maybe
just
like,
one, especially if it's
yeah,
good
who's going to
pizza.
eat just one? And like maybe I'll just get some fries on the side because like I'm just already screwing up,
Yeah.
right? It having those little like our strengths coach Jake says better bad decisions, right? Actually lead to long-term results in officers. But it's not this, you should cut out all seed oils, you should never have artificial sweeteners, which turns people right off because they're like, well, I'm never going to be able to do that,
Yeah, I'm
you
screwed.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm screwed, so screw it. So, having these like little tricks and stepwise approaches, I can talk about some more of those tricks, seem to be more successful from a long-term perspective. And then when an officer, gets out of that crazy season of life, right? Like when the kids are between 10 and, 12 and they're doing all the sports and now they're in college, they have more time, then we can talk about meal prep. Then we can talk about more workouts that are specifically going around the injuries they typically have and those kinds of things. Um, but you can still make progress. It just might not be perfect.
Yeah, that's great advice. It really is. It's the same thing from a fitness perspective. Oh man, I'm out of shape. I'm
Yeah.
going to start this new fitness program. I'm starting tomorrow.
Yep.
They haven't worked out in a year and
Nope.
they go into the gym and they crush themselves and then they're so sore they can't move for the next 3 or 4 days. Um, yeah, we haven't accomplished much there because
Mhm.
now you're not moving at all. You're even going to be a little bit more reluctant to get back in there, and it can be the same way with decisions about what you're going to eat. Like, well, and you mentioned I like that. I like that saying better bad decisions. That's a
Yeah,
good way
it's
to put
perfect.
it.
I wish I came up with it. It's
Yeah,
a
I
shame.
mean, but here, and this what I try to help police officers understand is there's never a one size fits all approach. I come from a just a general like I had a lot of success with the zone diet like very early in my career. But I did it for very specific reasons. I was looking for performance gains. And what I found when I did it was it completely changed the way that I slept. I've was like, wow, I'm sleeping really good eating this way. And then that kind of so I had a little bit of success that built on a little success. And
Hmm.
then, as Jim Collins likes to say, like we're getting the flywheel moving and we're building momentum. And momentum is a two-way street. It can be positive momentum. It can also be negative momentum. And that decision to eat the fries with the pizza instead of the pizza with the side, because a slice of pizza with the side salad, really, in the grand scheme of things, not that bad of an option.
Mm-mm.
Um, and it's certainly better than pizza and French fries.
Right.
So, um, and then I guess do you, what I have always found interesting is like I'm like one of these annoying people that are like why? Like I want to know why. Like,
Hmm.
well, why is the salad with the pizza better than the French fries with the pizza? And
Sure.
when you start getting into the physiology of it and the mechanistic behaviors, because the example that you gave with the homicide detective That's very, very common in policing.
Mhm.
It's not we can't just build our lives around that 8 hour schedule and then just assume that,
Nope.
well, I get off at 4, so I'm going home. Um, it just doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you might work 24 hours straight. You might work, I mean, there were times I think I worked, close to 36 hours straight. When you get certain cases or you get stuck in certain call out environments, whatever it might be. And that is a common thing. And so I always try to help people understand what's happening on the physical side of that reaction. Your brain needs glucose.
Mhm.
It's the biggest glucose suck in your body, outside of muscle, right? So it's like, hey, we need energy. And when your glucose levels are crashing, everything, your body, you're just starting to look for food. And this is generally where meal prep and things like that come in handy. So, um, do you find people that, when they have a little bit of success, that they become a little bit more interested in the physiology? Um, and do you think that helps build longer term success? Maybe I'm just fishing a little bit here, but I'm just kind of curious about what your experiences have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my one-on-one people are more interested in a solution, and a solution doesn't always involve physiology. It's
Just
how do
give
I
me,
fit this into
tell
my
me what I
lifestyle?
need to do. Yeah.
Yeah, just tell me, and that's like I get that a lot. Just tell me
Yeah.
what I need to do, and then I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you what you need to do, and then when you come back, and if you tell me it worked, great, but you can also come back and tell me it didn't work. It didn't work. Why did I eat a whole pizza? Let's talk about it. What led to that? What are some things that I think the lifestyle piece is the most overlooked part of the first responders community, because we have to factor in trauma and we have to factor in sleep deprivation, and those two things are most overlooked. Do I throw? I would say from the physiology piece, I throw that more in like when I'm doing the podcast, when I'm doing the presentations. I have a little thing called quick bites that can be incorporated into roll calls. I'll throw in some of that, but as soon as I talk about the physiology, I talk about how we can kind of override that or work with it, right? With the context of the lifestyle. So, for example, because you're a physiology nerd, sleep deprivation. One night of bad sleep can lead to a 24% increase in hunger due to an 18% decrease in the hunger suppressing hormone leptin and a 28% increase in the hunger stimulating hormone ghrelin, which leads to a craving for salty, fattier, sweeter foods the next morning. And all of us have felt that. I mean, even the dietitian has felt that. Okay. No
You
one,
can't escape it. That
you
is,
can't.
yeah, it's biology,
It's bad, right? And then you talk about that's just one night of bad sleep. Like that's
right?
my 4-month-old waking up 5 times because she's going through a sleep regression, right? But for the first responder community, that could be that's a regular occurrence,
Yeah.
right?
You
So
get
how
the
do
you
we
get the
override?
child waking up on top of being called
Right?
out and everything
Yep,
else.
yep, yep. Or sometimes you're sleeping in a different area or whatever, and you're kind of on edge, especially if you're on call. Um, So with that sleep deprivation piece, number one, we try and work on sleep hygiene, of course, with the fact like factoring in naps and the sleep environment and all of those kinds of things that you can control because some things you can't control. Um, but from a nutrition perspective, the override for that is going to be, can I try and incorporate more high fiber foods into my day? So you're familiar with fiber?
Oh yeah.
Fruits, veggies, whole grains, right? Indigestible form of carbohydrate. Um, And fiber is the first thing that goes out the window when you're tired and cranky. Why? Because when we're tired and cranky and we're going through the Chick-fil-A parking lot, we're not getting a side salad or a fruit cup. We're getting the biggest thing of French fries that we can get and whatever fried option that's available because we're tired and we're cranky, right? Um, and that's kind of just the reality of it. But um, fiber helps keep you full. So if I can get people to add more plants into their diet, whether it's a dried fruit bar, so that's it bars, kind press bars, smoothies keep their fiber, smart pop, skinny pop, white cheddar popcorns, they're not terribly high in fiber, but um, they're better than chips and they're a good alternative, right? When you need that crunchy kind of thing.
Yep.
Uh, and then also like the carb balance, like wraps are very high in fiber. So fiber is going to help keep you full And it's a way to override that sleep deprivation piece.
Do you, in your program, do you work with any wearable tech, or do you have officers that are coming to you and asking questions? Like one piece of, like I've been wearing a Fitbit and things like that for years, and I try to, um, I try not to nerd out too much. That's the
Mhm.
simplest way to put it. And I know for people that if they don't know what, you know, if they don't even know like the basics of what their lipid profile should look like, if they don't
Mhm.
know what a good resting heart rate is, for them personally, if they don't have good baselines, if you try to talk about technology like that right at the beginning, I think you can overwhelm people. But for people that are beginning to understand a little bit, and this is just me spitballing here right now because I don't wear a CGM, but I'm thinking about wearing one. I did for years, and I still have it. It's actually sitting right here in front of me. But I use a device called a Keto Mojo,
Mhm.
where I can test my blood ketones and my blood glucose.
Mhm.
And what I'd like to do is periodically for like maybe once every couple months, I will test myself 5, 6, 7 times a day, just
Sure.
because I want to know where I am, what I'm eating, and how it's impacting my blood sugar. Continuous glucose monitor can help educate individuals on their individual response to food, what they're eating, and how it's because everyone reacts a little bit differently to foods. And I'm sorry for going off. And see, this is where I'm good at tangents. So
Yeah,
you started talking
absolutely.
about fiber and
Yeah.
yeah, so this can lead us down a whole nother road. But if you have foods that are high in fiber, right, it can ameliorate some of that insulin response. You don't get these
Absolutely.
big peaks and valleys, so you don't get these huge hunger cravings. Um, I don't know. Are you guys in your program? Are you encouraging people to use that technology? Are you using it yourself, or what do you think? What do
Yeah,
you
I
think about
mean, so
that?
CGMs typically, we do not recommend CGMs for people who do not have diabetes or some sort of reason to monitor their blood glucose. Now, do I have people who are super health conscious who want to try them? Sure, that's fine, but we just don't have the evidence to suggest that that is going to be beneficial, or if that's going to start leaning into that kind of orthorexic, like you went a little too disordered in the other direction, which
Right,
means you're hyper focusing on things. Now I think there's a way to balance that. Sure, if you really want to use it, fine, but also understand that sometimes we want our blood glucose to spike a little bit, and that is prior to high intensity work, physical work. So workouts, SWAT trainings, active shooter drills. I'm trying to think of other things, but like stuff where you're about to go do a lot of hard physical work, you want your blood glucose to spike and then your muscles to pull it out and use it right away, right?
right,
Um, if you have something high in fiber, high in protein, high in fat prior to these things, it slows digestion, um, and therefore it doesn't get to the muscles to be used for physical work quite as fast. So that's another hard thing I think for the first responder community to understand is, um, I thought we were supposed to just cut out sugar, right? We should never, ever, ever have sugar. Well, the reality is the sugar in Gatorade or Drip Drop Liquid IV Fluid Tactical, these oral rehydration solutions can help with rehydration. They can help with replacing burned fuel, and they can help you do hard physical work longer. And that is when some of these alarms, some of these trainings and drills last 4 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours. I need you to continue to replace it, but you're also burning a crud ton of calories.
right.
This is not stuff that we have when we're an officer in an air conditioned, or a chief in an air conditioned suite, right? Um, it depends kind of situation. And I went on a tangent, but
No,
does that kind of
perfect. It
answer?
depends. That should be like you it, if you're talking to a nutritionist,
Mhm.
dietitian, exercise physiologist, and when you start asking questions, if they're not commonly or often interrupting you and saying it depends, you know,
100 times a
you're yeah,
day
you're
is all I say.
probably not getting good advice. You probably are speaking to an ideologue that has a set of ideas in mind about what works for everybody, and you should just do what I say.
which
Um,
is a huge problem. I'm going to be honest. Like
yeah.
even in OC health clinics that I've worked directly with, I've had people come in and tell my officers or my firefighters, just eat one meal a day. You should be fasting the whole day. Okay. Well, if a fire drops at 11 a.m., could that be putting my firefighter and their crew at a higher risk if they bomb? Absolutely. If you're a SWAT officer and you're fasting and you've got a raid or something like that, I can't afford to have you fasted and bonking. So, you want to be very wary if someone is telling you, even if it's a physician, you've got to go keto. It's the only way. You've got to intermittent fast. It's the only way. Without getting any information from you about your lifestyle, what, uh, like where you're stationed, what your assignment is. If they don't have any of that information and they're just telling you what to do, it's a big red flag, and it could be a potential risk because sometimes they're not taking into account that lifestyle piece. And it's essential. It can be life or death in these careers.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right? That's what Lao Tzu tells us.
Hmm.
And if you think about your career, just your life in general, because it's not first responders, police officers. I like to joke like if there's something that we can do, if there's a way to ruin our health and die early, we've probably found what that way is, and we've probably even found a way to perfect it.
Hmm.
So, um, people, that's again, this is where experts like you come in. And if you think about this, like this, your career, you come into the profession typically, and this is again, this isn't a one size fits all, but most commonly, people are coming into the profession in their 20s. They're coming in on the back end of maybe a career in athletics, maybe a college athlete, high school athletics, where they're generally more physically active. We're seeing a little bit less of that these days. We're getting, having struggles finding people that are coming into the profession, with high levels of physical, emotional readiness. They're bringing some baggage with them, but generally speaking, more active. And then you get in that first couple of years on the job, and now, once the excitement of it wears off, once the routine kind of kicks in, if imagine yourself walking a trail, like you're walking in the woods, and every so often you come to a fork in the trail, right? I'm not trying to go all Robert Frost on people here. I'm just saying, like, if you're climbing a mountain, if you're going through an area where it's uncharted territory, if you had someone at every fork there stop and ask you, "Hey, where are you headed?" If you say, "Which path is going to take me where I'm going?" and it's like, well, you really need a guide there that needs to ask you a few questions, like what are your
Yeah.
goals? How long do you need does it take to get there? What are your conditions? Because look, if let's just say you are climbing a mountain and you get to this fork in the path and there's a guide there and you say, "Hey, what's the shortest way up the mountain?" and he says, "Go left." uh, and you go left. But what he didn't say was that's also a 1,000 foot vertical climb. And by the way, you're 70 pounds overweight and you're carrying a 100-pound pack. Um,
Yep.
I've just sent you down a path that you're not going to succeed on. Where if I would have told you to go right, we have a switchback that's going to take you 3 times as long to get there, but you're going to get there, because you can take that low, slow, gentle walk back and forth across the mountain and until you get to that next um, fork in the road. So yeah, if you're super fit, you've been training, you're ready to go, and you can hit that 1,000 foot vertical. Um, it would have been nice to have someone at that trail at that point to also tell you, "Hey, look, going left is probably the right path for you because you're ready
Hmm.
for it." But
Right.
and two people together, and this is the most important thing because cops like to listen to other cops,
Right.
and that can be helpful. Don't get me wrong, but just what works for them may not work for you, and they're position on the path is it's just going to be different than yours, or it can be different than yours. So taking their advice, you may wind up tumbling back down the mountain. So
Yeah.
be very
Well,
careful about who you listen to.
and each diet is a tool, right? Like it can work for people, but you wouldn't use a battering ram to vent a ceiling. You know what I mean? Like there are different tools that are useful for different jobs, and there are different diets that may work better at different seasons of different people's lives. So, for example, intermittent fasting. Um, Intermittent fasting may not work super well for people in SWAT positions because they have such a high level of performance and they're working out consistently frequently. But for a chief in that air conditioned office, intermittent fasting might be a tool to restrict their intake. So, or restrict their calories. So they have more room to eat a larger dinner with their family. Right. So having someone to supervise you, right? Everybody calls me like the food police or like fat camp. I am fat camp, basically. I really feel like who's the guy in heavyweights? Um, but the cranky camp counselor at the fat camp
Yeah.
is kind of my vibe. But having a dietitian um, work with you will one help validate if you're struggling and you thought you only did barely anything that week. A dietitian can be like, dude, you had the pizza and the side salad. You're fine. And you saw that your body fat went down 0.5% in the past 2 weeks. You gained 0.5 pounds of muscle. Um, like you're making progress. Like I know it doesn't feel like it's that overnight progress and you didn't do everything perfect, but you're going in the right direction. Or hey, this has been happening multiple weeks in a row. Maybe we need to change our approach. Maybe logging every single thing you eat is not the right fit for you right now. Let's try a different approach. So that's what a dietitian can do. And if you don't have access to a free dietitian at your county, um, a lot of dietitians take health insurance. So if you go to ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com, you can find a bunch of different dietitians in your area with your insurance. I personally take Aetna and Care First or Blue Cross Blue Shield right now. But just keep in mind, dietitian and life insurance is super variant. Like I can't work with people in who can I not in certain states because of licensure laws. So, but a
Yeah, that's a
dietitian
whole
can be
nother subject too. So
yeah, don't even get me started. But dietitians, the challenge then is if you get that, you want a performance dietitian typically, because performance dietitians understand, like they're used to their athletes flying places, weird schedules, crazy training schedules. So they have a little bit of a leg up compared to that. Like you go see a clinical dietitian, and you're spending half of your session saying, well, I don't sleep at night and I don't do this. And they're trying to show you my plate for the 100th time. And you're like, I don't eat off a freaking plate, lady. So it is hard. It's not a perfect thing.
right.
Um, but having some sort of coach can be really helpful. You just want to be wary of any of those coaches who are like, this is the only way. And they didn't listen to any of the challenges that you have specific and they don't personalize it to you. It doesn't mean it can't work. I see it work all the time, but then people are working 10 times as hard. And healthy eating doesn't have to be brutal, it doesn't have to be hard. It just needs to be adjusted. So,
Yeah, and it needs to be adjusted based on what's realistic, and then also based on
yes,
what goals are, what goals you have.
yes.
It's again, begin with the end in mind. It's like in anything else in life that you do, that really should be the goal. So let's actually this could be like a fun little exercise.
Mhm.
So if we take this approach, begin with the end in mind, and if you're someone that's listening to this podcast, um, that you're like, hey, you know what? I've gained 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, whatever. And I need to make a change. I'm just not sure what to do.
Mhm.
We'll just talk in generalities here. But in thinking, the end in mind that I'll propose is like I'm on day one of my career, and I want to make it to um, the last day of year 25 when I know I'm going to retire. So at age 52, I'm going to be retiring. So, knowing right now that I'm getting ready to start into this life of shift work and everything else, what are some of the basic principles from new, we can throw exercise in there as well, but just even
Sure.
lifestyle overall. But we're kind of with the nutritional, background in mind. What are some general principles that will work for most people as we navigate? Hey, I know I'm going to be the first 5 years, I'll probably be working a lot of shift work. Then, the 5 to 10 year, maybe a little bit less, maybe afternoons, maybe back and forth a little bit. You know, Typically most people, in the back end of their career are more of, at least in the policing side, the night shifts are more for the generation, and the more veteran officers will gravitate towards investigations, daytime patrol
Right.
operations, stuff like that. So, what are some of just like the general suggestions that you have for people that are beginning their career about what a good way to navigate their days might be? I know that's big, but we can spend about 10, 15 minutes just kind of covering this, and I think that might be helpful.
No, I mean, I think there's a couple hacks when it comes to that, if you want to call it that. In general, I like to say if you can get a protein and a plant at each meal, you're doing better than 90% of the population in general. So a protein is, it can be animal based, chicken, fish, seafood, plants, nut, seed, soy, lean choices for red meat if you're going to do it, pork, that kind of stuff. So a protein, and that is going to be for maximizing muscle. So whether that's maximizing muscle gain when you're in a maintenance or you're trying to gain weight, or in a muscle, or when you're trying to lose fat, keeping protein high can help spare muscle and maximize fat loss, right? So protein is for muscle maintenance and gain. And then the plant piece is for the fiber, right? So most things that are plant-based are going to be high in fiber. So ideally, this is a fruit or a vegetable, or like I'll count beans, legumes in there as well. So that's going to help keep you full. It's going to give you the antioxidants, the vitamins and minerals to help with recovery from shift and just general health, right? So a protein and a plant fills the two biggest gaps in first responder diets. Like I said, like when you're just not thinking, a lot of people are potentially skipping the protein, less common in first responder communities, and then more likely to be skipping the plant piece. So that doesn't mean don't get a carb. Like absolutely get a carb. But I know for me, if like potatoes are an option, the first thing that's going on my plate is the potato, right? Or the rice or the carb or the bread. So that's going to be on their plate regardless, or whatever they're eating out of. Um, so if you can get that protein and a plant at each meal and snack, you're going to help keep your muscle around or grow it. You're going to stay more full. You're going to have more energy, and you're going to maximize your body composition in general because, again, you're focusing on muscle growth and regulating hunger.
I love it. And I'm gonna drop a few suggestions in just for police officers in general that are listening to this. Um, so one of the common, uh, let's call it an excuse, one of the common excuses or complaints,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a logistical issue is, hey, I work nights, so my schedule is just mixed up.
Yes.
And people, it's kind of bizarre to think about life in this way, but when you wake up, you typically think about eating breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
and then 4 to 6 hours later, you think about eating lunch, and then
Mm-hmm.
4 to 6 hours after that, you think about eating dinner, and then you maybe throw a few snacks in between there. But if your life starts when you're waking up at 5 p.m. or
Mm-hmm.
4 p.m., and you've got to be to work at 6, um, well, what does that look like? Because your breakfast is at dinner time. So if your spouse is at home, your kids are getting home from school or whatever, you're waking up and starting your day. They're, you know, past the midpoint of their day, and they're heading into evening. So your first meal of the day could quite frankly be dinner. Um,
Yes.
and sometimes people just have a mental hurdle with that. Like, oh, I have to eat like cereal when I wake up, which, I won't even get going on cereal, but um, you have to kind of like think about reframing, like in your own mind, like what meals are, and it's kind of bizarre to say it. Maybe it's not bizarre to you, but sometimes looking at food in the best way, or in some ways, man, I'm struggling to say this, but you have to remove some of the emotional attachments to food in
Sure.
terms of what actually food is and what it means to you, or at least be conscious of it, so that can help you make decisions. So when you do wake up and you're going to eat your first meal of the day at 4:30 or 5 o'clock or 5:30, whatever that, whatever those time windows are going to be, it might not be what the average person is looking at on a daily basis. So um, think, if you're working nights, that right there can kind of send people into a spiral, because they may wake up and feel like, well, I've got to eat my eggs or my Wheaties or whatever when I'm waking up and getting out of bed. So if you're making meals for yourself, or if your family, if you're having a family meal, when you're single, it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you
Right.
want. But when you have other people that you're trying to, that you're living with, and in that family environment, that can actually lead to some stress in some environments, because
Totally.
particularly if one person, maybe one person has a good routine down, they're at a comfortable body weight for them, they feel good, where another one maybe is struggling a little bit, and it's typically um, in these cases where the person that's working nights, who's got they're not exercising as much. They've got elevated cortisol levels, like all these things that might drive, some metabolic dysregulation. That can create a friction point, and then we get into some emotional issues. So first, that's a long way of saying sometimes you just have to even think about what a meal is, um, and then think about from the macronutrient perspective, like how you're going to balance it. Like you said, protein, fats, carbs, you need them all. Generally speaking, there are extremes that people can do in between that may be successful for, specific reasons, but generally
Mhm.
speaking, that's going to be good. So here's just a quick hack that I would say. If let's just say you're a single, you wake up, you first thing you do is get dressed, and you're on your way to work, and you're hungry, you need to get something to eat, um, and you're the type of person that goes through a drive-through. So if you were to go to McDonald's, or if you were going to go to Wendy's, or you're going to go to Chipotle, or whatever your favorite is on the way in, just because you've made that first decision of the day to eat fast food doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a bad meal. There are like I'm gonna have to come back to that. Better bad decisions.
Mhm.
So if you go through the drive-through, or you go to Wendy's or something like that, I'll just use Subway, because Subway was one of my staples. I use Subway a
Yeah.
lot, just because I knew that Subway, they don't sell French fries, and they generally don't sell anything that's terribly bad for you in a Subway.
Mhm.
It's easy to make a good meal in a Subway. Even if you're a person that's trying to cut on, reduce the amount of carbs that you have. Here was just a little hack that I would do. I would, instead of getting a 12-inch sub, what I would do is get a 6-inch sub and ask for double meat. And
Mhm.
then I would make sure that I piled on the vegetables, even
Mhm.
sometimes vegetables that I wouldn't normally eat. I would ask for lettuce and spinach and green peppers and banana peppers and cucumbers. And I would have a little olive oil and vinegar on there, and a little bit of salt and pepper.
Mhm.
And you can do things like say, like, hey, you know what? I'm in the mood for a little bit of mayonnaise, but do me a favor. Just put a really, really small amount of mayonnaise on that, and
Yep.
some mustard. And I know this sounds complicated, but when you do that, now you've literally just, reduced your carb load. The insulin response that you're going to get if you eat a foot long sandwich with 30 grams of protein, rather than a 6-inch sub that's got half those carbs and 50
Right.
grams of protein. That was a long little
Yeah,
tangent.
I mean, to kind of touch on that, when we're talking about eating for midnights, it all comes down to it depends, right? So sometimes intermittent fasting works really well for people at midnights because they'd rather eat with their families, they'd rather eat during the daytime, right? But other people, they notice large energy deficits. They're having trouble staying awake, so then they're over consuming caffeine, which we can talk about.
Oh yeah.
Um, and all those things. So sometimes I set it up so people are more grazing during midnights because that helps keep them awake and maximize their energy levels. Again, you're trying to go for a protein and a plant when you are grazing. So it might be a protein bar, it might be a protein shake. It might be like hummus and veggies and maybe some pretzel chips for razzle dazzle. Um, and spreading those out at least 3 to 4 times throughout the shift. Now, if you know you're getting hammered, it's probably not the best decision. You kind of just have to look at the shift and really kind of assess how you feel. If your energy levels are tanking and you feel like garbage, it's not working. So you have to kind of adjust. The other thought too there is, usually for midnights, it's like, okay, well, I only have McDonald's and some weird crappy 7-Eleven in terms of options if I forget my lunch or whatever, and I don't have the energy for meal prep. If you're spending upwards of $15 on fast food, which anybody going to Chipotle and not getting their first responder discount is doing, um, you want to look at some of these meal prep companies because yes,
Yes.
they cost money. They're more expensive. But the reality is if you're spending $15 at the fast food restaurant, you could save a significant amount of money. Most meal prep companies like Mighty Meals, Factor, Territory, they are going to be around $9 to $11 a meal. And you've already made the decision. They have a
Yep.
protein, they have a carb, they have a veggie, and you are not making a decision from a food perspective when you're already tired and cranky, right? So those meal prep companies may end up actually saving you money because you're contracting out time and you're contracting out that decision. So it's something to consider. So for me right now, I've got a 4-month-old. I'm trying to grow a business. I work at a full-time job while doing that. I don't have the energy or the time to do meal prep, and it's my job. Like it's the one job I have, but it's that season of life where I'm a new mom and trying to figure this stuff out. So I'm doing a lot of I'm spending the money for meal prep right now, um, just because I can't keep living at that level. So it's just something you want to consider. But it does come potentially at a financial cost. But for a lot of people who are doing the overtime train, sometimes the financial cost is worth it.
I couldn't agree more. It really is. And I'll tell you, it doesn't cost more. It will save you money, but
Mhm.
it not only does it save you money in the near term, but it also is going to save you significant money on the back end. And this is
Yep.
so this we think about begin with the end in mind. I'll give a quick example. I briefly told this story before, but to emphasize this point, one of my sons when he's in college now, but in high school he was a wrestler,
Hmm.
and he had an infection, and we wound up having to go and like because he's a kid and doesn't realize oh, you have to actually put antibiotics on these things and you have to clean
Hmm.
them out all the time, and so I like, dude, we're going to urgent care like right now because you've let this thing you've let this thing fester. So we're sitting in the urgent care in a, like on in the evening, like at a 6 o'clock at night, and this place is freaking packed. I mean, it is
Mm.
just jam packed. And I kind of had this observation, man. Every time I'm here, this place is just jam packed. And so looking around the room, you see a lot of things. There are people that are in there with, for some acute trauma that hey, I need to get this addressed right now.
Sure.
Moms carrying kids that have viruses or coming home from school sick, things like that. But that's not the majority of what you're finding in these waiting rooms. And so without getting into specifics, when we were done and we walked out and we sat in the car, I asked my son a question. I said, "Hey, what did you see in there?" He's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "In the waiting room while we were waiting to go in, what did you see?" And he was like, "Sick people." I'm like, "Well, what about them? You know, was there any common recurring theme that you saw in that room?" And he's like, "Oh, I saw a lot of people in walkers, with walkers, people that were, significantly overweight." So you start to kind of see these trends, and I'm like, well, how old do you think a lot of those people were? And he was like, I don't know, old. I'm like, well, what do you think, to a teenager? I'm like, what do you think is
Right.
old? Like 40? And I'm like, dude, I'm in my 50s. It's like, um, so I use it as an opportunity to tell him, I'm like, look, you're in your teenage years now, but if you go to like, and every cop and fireman knows this because we spend so much time in emergency rooms and in hospitals, like, and oftentimes that is with acute trauma, like car accidents, fire, victims of crime, all those types of things. But when you go into these environments, I mean, you see a good little snapshot of society at large. And I have a very good friend that's an ER physician, and one of his big complaints is like he spends 80% of his time, working in an emergency environment, treating family care issues. Like people like because it's just
Yeah.
these the things that people aren't doing on their own or should be, maybe because they don't have the education, the knowledge, the background, the experience. But the long, the point of this long story is every single decision that you make about what you're going to eat next is impacting the, like, how are you going to feel for the next few hours? How is your body going to respond in the next 24 hours? And do you want to be moving closer to a goal or farther away from a goal? Because if you make the decision to eat the French fries and the double cheeseburger fully loaded with, fake mayo and everything, that's okay in the moment, but just understand that's moving you away from your long-term goals. And if you think about that continuum, you're not on the path to wellness, you're on the path to sickness. So one
Yeah.
decision in that continuum every once in a while, not that big a deal. Just a little bit of a, maybe a pause. But if you make two or three of those decisions in a row, now you're backsliding. And now you're gaining
Right.
weight, and now you're moving towards sickness, not and so these decisions are important because they are going to help you to a healthier future. Think about the cost of healthcare. The number one reason why police officers and firefighters and others, like not just first responders, but one of the biggest financial decisions they have to make about when they're going to retire is how are they going to afford healthcare? Where is their healthcare coming from? Not everybody has it built into their pension plan. Some people are going to be paying out of pocket. And the sad reality is, if you're on that sickness continuum, if you're making those choices throughout your 20 years, when you do have healthcare that's available to you, that is, being subsidized by your employer, then you go into retirement and you lose those benefits. And on top of that, you're at a point where you're as unhealthy as you've ever been. Guess what? Those there is a significant financial cost to you. So, uh, with Jim Vitu, who was on my last episode that was released, we were talking about the law of compounding interest when it comes to
Right.
finance. So I'd like to get people to think about the compounding interest in terms of health. Like these spends, while they may seem like a dollar here, $2 there, give or take, it could be at the back end of your life, that $1 that you spent towards a healthy meal could save you 100, 500, $1,000 towards some type of long-term sick care that you're engaged in now because these decisions have accumulated over the course of your career.
Well,
So
absolutely. But the other side too is, you might actually be saving money half the time.
yes,
You look at Grubhub costs. I mean, the delivery for one meal is $50 suddenly. You could have had 4 to 5 meals bought. So you kind of just have to think in advance a little bit, um, as well.
tangents. Sorry. See, I took
No
us on a
worries.
long one there.
It
And
happens.
so I bet you get and this is we were talking before we went on air. We have a mutual friend, Troy Torrance, who does uh worked for the Indiana State Police. He's been a previous guest on the podcast, so I would encourage people to go back and listen to the episode that I did with him. But he was in a at a conference we were presenting at. He used a couple of your slides and was talking about what some of these cheats, if you want to call them cheats, but what all it really is planning it, right?
Mhm.
It's using
And meeting people where they're at.
a
And a
little
lot of people
forethought.
where they're at is in a hole. So you want to talk about addressing the people who and all departments have this, people who do not care about their health or appear not to. They're in the middle of a divorce, they're in the middle of something. They're like the Eeyores of the department kind of thing. You're not going to get an Eeyore of the department to suddenly go vegan. Like something wild has to pop off in their life to make that decision. And you're going to get the people who are really stuck actually moving with healthier frozen food, healthier fast food. Because you're meeting them where you're at. You're like, I see you, you're struggling. Let me find a way that's going to make this a little easier on you instead of just suck it up and eat chicken and salad. Like it's just that doesn't work for most people.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So here's what I used to tell people. Um, sure, I could go to White Castle because it's open till 3 o'clock in the morning. I could go to Taco Bell because it's open all night. If I didn't, if I didn't have the time to prep and take something with me, um, you know, Subway was always one of my go-tos, Jimmy John's, something like that, where I have a little bit of control. And then, this is just, it's a little bit of a cop thing too, but we like to be able to see people that are making our food,
Absolutely. I
especially
get that.
when you're in uniform.
Yeah.
You get a cheeseburger for a cop, Um, yeah, we try to avoid things like that. But again, that was just a personal preference. Not only because I could see what they were doing, but I would have control over what they were putting into whether they were making me a salad or whatever. So if you do go to Chipotle and spend and you can't go to fast food restaurants anymore without spending $20. It's crazy how expensive things have
No.
gotten. But
And that's why
um,
I'm saying like the meal prep almost ends up saving you money. It's not going to be
yes.
cheaper than buying stuff and making it at home. But if you've been trying to buy stuff and make stuff at home and it's been going bad several weeks out of the month, you got to reassess.
Yeah, convenience, man. Convenience, it has a lot of hidden costs involved in it.
Totally.
Um,
But like, what a time to be alive. Like, if I had a child without Instacart, like 20 years ago, I don't think I would have survived. Like, the, yes, it's
that's
costing me money. Um, but I also know, like, when I look at my time for an hour, what I can make in that hour is significantly more. So, and a lot of officers, their overtime money is pretty high. So,
You sound like my niece, because she's got two young children. It's great. It's like cracks me up when I talk about
yeah.
Instacart
I'm not
having.
going into the grocery store with a child. That sounds like if I go to hell, like that's what's going to happen. I'm going to have 7 children and I'm going to be in a grocery store. And it's anyway.
Uh, well, I'm the youngest of eight, so I can tell you, and yeah,
Yeah, it's not
I
good.
there was I didn't have to worry about being overweight as a child because I was more, it's like I say
You're
this
fighting for
flippantly,
food,
yeah,
right?
but
At
yeah,
that
you
point,
get your
like,
plate at the table, and when food was put on the table, that's when you ate, right?
right.
It's just something, and that it is kind of a little important thing to think about. Like there was no snacking in a family of eight. It's not like you just opened up the cabinet and there was a bag of chips or something you could grab.
No,
It was like, yeah, there might be a can of green beans in there, um, but
yeah, but you're
there
not
was
going to those.
no hyper palatable, highly
Yeah.
processed foods sitting in the cabinet. And that's another rabbit hole we could go down in a minute. But I want to go back. So if so, let's just say you do go to Chipotle.
Mhm.
I've given you an example of what you can do at a Subway. Um, you you have control over what you want. Don't be afraid to tell people to make a modification for what you want. So if you go in and you get, rather than burritos are awesome. I love burritos. But
Mhm.
like if you're again, if your goal is to maintain a certain weight, or if you're trying to lose weight, depending on where you are on that continuum, right? The right thing might be to say, hey, look, instead of a burrito, I'm going to have a burrito bowl. And can you add some extra lettuce? Put a little extra lettuce on that, and then just only do half the rice.
Right.
So you get a little bit of the rice, you're still getting the same things, but you remove some of the bad stuff, you add more of the good stuff. Hey, and then look, can you give me double steak on that, double chicken? Okay, it's going to cost you 250 extra. Yeah, it's another $2 for the guac or whatever. But you're balancing your meal. You're getting more of the things that are good for you. You're eliminating some of the bad. You're not getting
Yep.
the French fries. And I,
Yep.
I would say always, 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 this is one of the things, always get water. Never drink your calories. I mean, that's
Yep.
probably one of the worst things two things if you're going to tell people, look, never drink your calories net and oh, my dogs are excited. Um, yeah, I mean, never drink your calories. I'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Sure. Sure.
Um, Now there's always the caveat because one of the things I wanted, well, before I move on, any anything that you would add to that for people in terms of having those options? Because the last thing I would even say with that, almost every town has a grocery store or something that's open 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
On days where if I didn't have the opportunity to bring something with me, or I knew I wasn't going to be able to get what I want, I would just go into a grocery store and I would literally go buy a thing of lunch meat or some pre-cooked chicken, stuff like that that's in there, and an apple and an orange, some like a pepper or something like that. Oftentimes in grocery stores, even 20 years ago when I was doing this, you could find one of these grocery stores that have peppers and stuff cut up already, and you could literally just go out to your car, almond butter in a little pack. You eat a thing of almond butter and eat an apple. Boom. And then, you're good for a couple hours, and, you're getting a good balance of protein, you know, good carbs with lots of fiber, healthy fats, and, cutting out all of the junk.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. I mean, even like a bag of salad, if you just cut off the top, dump the stuff in, get some pre-cooked chicken, boom. And then, fill out your carbs with something else, later on.
Yeah,
Um, Piece of fruit, smart pop, skinny pop, white cheddar popcorn, just for the crunch and to add again some razzle dazzle to your shift. There are definitely ways and workarounds, but it does require a little bit more willpower and discipline to do so. And I know for me, like my rule when I'm at work is I don't eat crap. Like you could put cake in front of me, there's a very low chance I'm going to eat it. Um, but there it can be hard when you're sleep deprived, right? So, uh,
absolutely.
if you want to do a sweet, try to limit it to one sweet a shift. And I've had people lose 20 pounds on the one sweet a shift rule because they have to be strategic. They can't just eat whatever's on the counter in the back, you know, um, constantly every time they get back to go to the bathroom or to heat up a meal or whatever. They have to decide when they're going to want that the most. And most people, that's going to be on the latter half of their shift. Um, so just it's okay to have the sweet. It's just be strategic with it.
I'll tell you a little story. So we did this thing, a campaign called Sugar Free LPD.
Hmm.
We put up signs, because you have there's always a detective or two, or some records clerks, or somebody that has the office that's got the bowl full of
Right.
Reese's or M&Ms, or
Yep.
the one person that always brings in fresh cookies. And then, I like to joke, I mean, if you ever want to take out a police department, just send free poison donuts in instead of I
Easily.
probably should edit this out.
Yeah. Same with the fire department. They're just as bad with the donuts.
Well, and community members, like it's like people love to support, and so we
Yes.
we have this, like, just in America, there's this connection, like, that from our brain to our stomach, with
Hmm.
sugar and sweets, and something that just makes you feel good. Like I want,
Totally.
And it's amazing, right? You get little kids that bake you cupcakes or cookies on, and they bring them in for special occasions or just to say thank you, and they set them out. And so, when you talk about like willpower and stuff like that, you walk by like, I'm sorry, you're not walking by that really good chocolate chip cookie 7, 8, 9, 10
Nope.
times. Um, Especially if you're hungry and if you haven't planned appropriately, if you're a little bit sleep deprived, if your insulin levels are high, you're
Hmm.
stressed out a little bit, your cortisol levels are out of whack. I mean, when you walk by that, and this is what I try to get people to understand because they were like, oh, the Chiefs is, you think you're the food police, right? I used to get that, like, oh man, like I'm
Hmm.
like people would look around for me before they reached to grab one of those donuts or a cookie, or they would be feel guilty if they walk by and me seeing
Right.
them eating them. I'm like, look, you're grown adults. You eat whatever you want, but I just I just want to let you know that there are repercussions for the decision to
Right.
do that. And so if you think about this for the same reason you want to meal prep, you want to think about plan in advance as much as possible for what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat. It's for those moments when you're hungry, when your hormones, when your blood glucose, your cortisol, all the like when you're at those weak moments in stress, you're only walking by that chocolate chip cookie so many times before you break off half of it and eat it.
Right.
And then you're coming back for the second half. You're kidding
Hmm.
yourself if you're not coming back for the second half. So um if you think it, and so I actually, there was a point where I was like, look, don't bring in cookies. Don't bring in donuts. Don't just leave those things sitting out. If you're going to have a celebration, as soon as they're done, get rid of it. Like, don't leave it
Totally.
sitting in there because people walking by are going to eat it. And people looked at me like, "Oh, you don't care about us. You're so mean." And it's like, no, I do care about you. That's why I don't want those things sitting around, because I know it's just, it's just not good for you. It's just not good for your performance. It's
Right.
just it's just a bad day. So staging your environment, yeah,
Mhm.
there are just little things like that that you can do that will build that will take you on the path to success rather than on the path to struggle. You want to be on the struggle bus all the time, then pick up the cookie, grab, then leave the bowl of M&Ms on your desk, because it's not just the people walking by that are going to grab them, it's you. You're eating them all day, and you're spiking your insulins and all that. But I've gone on another tangent. All
Totally
right,
fair.
okay, we got to close this thing up, otherwise I'm gonna be rambling all day.
Sure.
So with Rescue RD, I love the name
Hmm.
of that, by the way, and I love your
Thank you.
background. Um, the if there's a question I have, is there anything real, like, I think we've covered a lot of things at a very high level. Um,
Sure.
I think for people that are listening, if something in here has interested you, or you're curious about learning more, would encourage you to reach out to Rescue RD or someone like Megan, because here the analogy, when I think we talked about this when we were on the pre-podcast discussion we had a few weeks ago, like when I used to run a CrossFit gym, I would get people that would come in and say, hey, look, I just want to come in and check it out and see what you're doing here. I've heard a lot about CrossFit. I've heard it's really effective, but it looks really hard. So I'll be back in 3 months. I'm going to go get in shape a little bit before I come back.
Right.
And I would be like, no, like, wait.
Please
Like,
just come now. I don't
yeah,
understand.
here's what I would rather you do. Spend 3 months with me
Yeah.
and with our coaches here. So, we can monitor you, we can help you, we can move you along the path. And then 3 months from now, then once you've got this figured out, then do it for 3 months on your own. But
Totally.
flip that. Um, so with that kind of mindset, and what are the benefits that people are going to get um, from contacting you at Rescue RD, or something, similar services? What's the main point that you would want try to people, the main takeaway that people would get from that?
I would say like the relief that comes with uh eating healthier on shift can be easier. It doesn't have to be an uphill battle. So that's what my expertise is in, is making eating healthy on shift work easy and mindless, and in a stepwise approach. So I have a lot of different types of products. Like, I mean, for free, I'm on social media. I post regularly tips on how to eat healthier on shift work, with the considerations of the job. But I have quick bites, which is 10-minute videos. I give you 12 of them and you can put them into roll call or lineup, as, hot topics in law enforcement, nutrition tips. And then I have like a whole wellness day, 6 to 8 hour wellness day that I talk about nutrition for law enforcement. If you like the nitty gritty, if you like the physiology, you want your peer fitness trainers to be trained. The next one I'm doing is in North Carolina. So, I have a ton of different products and presentations and that kind of stuff, but it all comes down to making this easier and not this uphill battle for those officers, really actually meeting them where they're at in a language that makes sense to them.
Okay, so now I've got a personal question. You can choose to deflect and not answer this question, or you can
Sure.
answer it. So you're a new mom.
Yeah.
So you've gone from being a bodybuilder, an athlete,
Yes.
a dietitian,
Hmm.
where it's just you, then you and your husband, and now you've got um, this amazing little gift that's coming along with you, but
Hmm.
it changes things, right?
Totally.
So what are some of the challenges as a new mom? Uh, like have you I mean, is there anything that you've kind of like really like understood at a different level now? Like, okay, now I get it when, when someone said, hey, they were just tired, it's been 2 weeks since
Yes.
they've slept, like what are some of the things that being a new mom has taught you about how you approach your work and how you can help first responders?
Yeah, totally. I mean, to be fair, I've never been single. I've been dating with my husband since high school. He's an IT guy, like not even a first responder. Like just put this guy up in high school
Well,
or
then
whatever.
he's on call 24/7 if he's working in
Yeah,
IT.
yeah. Well, essentially, in a different way. But I think the hardest thing for me was less on the nutrition front and more on the fitness front. Like I did not realize how wrecked your body is after having a baby. And like being pregnant was the worst thing in the world for me. Like I didn't even have that bad of a pregnancy. I was just tired all the time and I hated everyone. And the firefighters just kept calling me fat and telling me that I looked like Tim Allen when he found out he was Santa Claus. And it was just, you know, hot. So, it was really hard, like just breath work was brutal on my core. Like just doing a body weight workout was like, and when you come from bodybuilding and like that's where your body's at, I just like I knew it, but I didn't think it would happen to me. You know, it
Yeah.
was like I had this level. So the fitness part was hard. The nutrition front, like I kind of already knew what it was going to be. Like I had healthier, fast, frozen food available. I knew I could set up mighty meals if I needed to. I had a lot of family support from a meal perspective, and they knew not to just give me pasta and crap because, I'm not gonna just eat that. So, and the sleep side of it, she's actually been pretty decent. That firstborn decent sleeper, so I haven't had too much sleep deprivation.
Lucky
Um,
you.
so it's um I think the fitness side was the hardest, but I've definitely lowered the expectations of myself. Like I'm trying to grow a business, I'm trying to work full time, and I'm trying to raise a fresh baby that I've never done before in my life. So I can't be focused and all in on the nutrition and fitness stuff. So I'm relying on some of my tips I've been giving to officers for years. And then when things slow down and I have things under control a little bit more, I'll do more meal prep. I'll do more of the maybe I'll go from 3 times a week working out to 5 again. It's just I've got to kind of flex with that season of life. So I hope that makes sense.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, that's that. And we all learn as we go. But as a young officer with no children,
Hmm.
how things changed for my wife and I when we and our first child, he didn't sleep through the
Completely
night until
different.
he was almost 2. And I was
Ugh.
working, I worked night shift for give or take basically 14 years straight, and I
Mhm.
loved the work, but that meant that my wife was home by
Right.
herself at
And that can
night.
be brutal.
And we had two children in a 4-year span. Then we waited, um, a little bit, or I should say 2 years, and then it was 7 years for the third. But and I'm not necessarily sure you get better at it, but you learn to adapt. And
Sure.
so when it comes to time management, things like that, now that because our boys are all, two of them, one out of college, one almost out, one getting ready to go, all at different stages. Now it's trying to teach them some of these same lessons, like, hey, you've got more time now than you realize that you do have.
Right.
And you have children and other things and other obligations come in, then you start, now that life starts to compress a little bit. And
Sure.
so having and this was going to be the benefit, that I would say, like, having people like you that can help people in those transitional periods in particular,
Hmm.
where you're struggling a little bit. That's when mentors can pay huge dividends, and they can save you so much time. You don't want to
Yep.
wreck something before you realize you've wrecked it, and now you've got to turn around and try to fix it. Don't be afraid to invest up front. Find people that know what they're doing. And this is where, as cops, sometimes we try to look at other cops only, and we only listen to what they're saying. And I'm not saying there's no benefit to that, but
Sure.
sometimes you got to drink right from the hose. You got to go
Well, and the
right
other
to
thing
the
is they're not
source.
working with 15 to 20 officers a week.
Right.
They're not necessarily listening to the same struggles and then giving suggestions and seeing what works, right? They're just like having that conversation. Just do what I do, bro. And I used to do that.
Yeah.
I used to do that
We
before
all
I
do. I
was,
mean, you
yeah,
start to figure it
seasoned,
out.
Um, I'm not perfect in that sense, but it, it doesn't always work, you know. So
Well, that's awesome. And we could talk for days, because you teach programs that are days long anyway. So
mhm,
um let me just wrap with this, right? Having a good fitness and a good nutrition strategy, it's so important for your metabolic health, for your
mhm,
cardiovascular health. It's
mhm,
so good for your mental and your emotional health. Um, it impacts your ability to do your job and to do it well, to be there for your partners, to be there for your community, because that's what they need you. That's what we sign on for. Nobody signs on for the fat, unhappy, miserable schmuck that just makes it seem like it's, when they call for service. That's not who they want there. And no, we don't hire people to be that person, but we're really good at creating those people by throwing them into this meat grinder that is public safety. So it's so refreshing to see Fairfax and other places, Montgomery, where you've been, big, small programs, to see people investing and utilizing resources, like you and other experts, to come in and help us accelerate the learning curve, get over some of those humps. These things are not generally, everybody finds these things at different times throughout their career when they're going to need them. You don't necessarily need them all the time, but if you want, if you want a high level of mental and physical resilience, then take this stuff seriously. Contact people like Megan, and maybe in the next episode, we can have Megan tell a transformational story about you and your success,
mhm.
um, or somebody that that could use this. Don't be afraid to give references, and and then the last thing is, like, don't be dogmatic, right? Like, find what works.
Mhm.
Find experts, listen to what they have to say. Um, you know, things change. The science changes, our understanding of the science and nutrition changes. Things are different. They're evolving. The supplements come and go. Treatments come and go. But the one thing that I think is always going to be consistent, and that's always going to be there, is the the decision that of what you make every single time, of what you're going to put in your mouth, is the one thing that's always constant. So if you can get that right 80 to 90% of the time, you know, you're going to have some success.
Absolutely.
Final takeaway. That's it.
Just to make the better dad decisions like we talked about earlier, small steps can make progress.
All right. Well, we rambled a lot on there. I should say I rambled a lot. You gave very, very
I'm the
good,
same way.
concise
It's okay.
answers.
I'm used to rambling.
I'm the rambler. Thank you, Megan. Really appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us. I appreciate you sharing your expertise, your
Mhm.
willingness to dive into this world with first responders. As my buddy Greeny says, we're a sick bunch and we need all the help we
But
can
fun.
get.
You're never going to be bored.
Yeah, you never a dull moment. You mentioned that you have a website. Can you just
Mhm.
tell me what it is real quick? Just say it out loud and your social media
Yep.
handles stuff.
www.rescuerd.com. And then I'm on Instagram at rescue.rd, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn, posting pretty regularly. Content leans towards firefighters because I just haven't figured out how to talk to both at the same time with a really targeted message. But a lot of it's the same stuff, just in red instead of blue, you know? So
I love
guys
it.
hate to hear it, but it's reality.
Yeah, well, food is food, right?
Yeah.
Stress is stress. All right, that's awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Reach out, get in touch with Megan. I'm sure that she has speaking engagements that she can do, work that she can bring to your departments. Hit me up. I can put you in contact with her, or you can hit her up directly through her website. Outside of
Awesome.
that, we're going to be 1042 until our next time. So have a great day.